Thank you for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate, where we come together each day to introduce you to our network of business and community leaders and to discuss issues that impact business. This week, our focus is on women in business, and we've been talking with women who make a difference in business and women's integral and sometimes unique roles in the workplace. Today, we're connecting with DORA, that's Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies, and Rebecca Laurie is here with us.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi, it's great to have you.
So great to be here.
And I really appreciate the guest you brought in for us today.
It's a special
about
one.
Women in business, and what a great background and appointment that Marguerite Salazar has as the executive director of the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies Insurance Commissioner. So
Right.
glad to have you here too.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have Marguerite here. So Marguerite is the executive director of DORA, but she's also the insurance commissioner. She was appointed as executive director by Governor Hickenlooper just this past July, but she had been serving as insurance commissioner and the head of the Division of Insurance under DORA since 2013. So prior to joining the state, Marguerite, she served as the Region 8 Regional Director for the Department of Health and Human Services. And that was an appointment by President Barack Obama. And it was to oversee the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, not only in Colorado, but also Wyoming, Montana, Utah, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And then she also led one of the largest community health centers in the country for over 25 years. So she brings such a wealth of experience that we're going to be hearing about. As we've talked about before in previous shows, DORA's Executive Director's Office provides the leadership and support to DORA's 9 divisions, in which we've brought different leaders and staff members on to talk about. And it functions as part of the Executive Director's Office as that administrative oversight for the department, as well as houses the Colorado Office of Policy Research and Regulatory Reform, known as COPPER, and we've had them on the show, as well as the Broadband Fund. So to have these duties in addition to insurance commissioner really takes a very certainly passionate approach,
Absolutely.
but very seasoned approach. And so we're very glad to have Marguerite on board as our executive director. Welcome, Marguerite.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So as you mentioned, Tammy, this week is Women in Business. To me, there's probably no better person to talk to about this. Marguerite, can you share with us your story, just a little bit about yourself, your career and background, maybe even starting from the beginning, such as, where did you grow up? How did that set your course to where you are today?
Sure. I'll start back in the beautiful San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. That's where I was born many years ago. But it is home, and I'm one of those people who is a 6th-generation native. My family has been in that area for many, many years. My great-great-great-great-grandfather came into Colorado from what was then a territory of New Mexico in 1803. This is when he was born. He came to Colorado a little later. So we've been there for a really long time. I grew up in a family that really embraced community service and civic duty. And so one of 6 children, I was right in the middle. And I think being a middle child really allows you to do a lot of things that nobody's really paying attention to because you're not the oldest or the youngest. So you get to do a lot of things. And so I did a lot of observing in my childhood. As you look at my career, a lot has been in service. And, you think, well, where does that really come from? And as I think back, it really comes from a lot of things I saw in my father. And one of the stories I wanted to share was that my grandparents on my mother's side lived in a little town called Monte Vista, and we lived in a little town south of there called La Jara. And every Sunday afternoon we would drive. It was maybe 30 miles to go see them. And so we'd get ready and we'd have our Sunday best and we'd go out to get in the car, and my dad would always start washing the car. It was one of those things we could just predict, and we'd always hope that wasn't going to happen, but he would do that. So as we would all stand around watching him wash the car before we got on the road, and a gentleman who was known as sort of the town drunk approached us. And I think every town has somebody like that.
Sure.
Someone that we all were afraid of. You know, we had created all these great mysteries and stories. Somebody even said that he had killed somebody at one time.
It's like the Boo Radley,
Exactly, exactly. And so this fellow, he's walking up to us, and we're all standing there wondering, what's going to happen? What's Dad going to do?
You kind of freeze a little bit,
You
right?
do, and I'm thinking, I'm standing next to, here's this guy. Wait till I tell the kids at school tomorrow.
Right.
So he's real bloody, and he's very just disheveled. And Dad, who was always wore a white shirt, walked up to him, put his hand on his shoulder, and said, "What's going on? What happened?" He took him in the house and washed him up because the guy explained he had been in a fight. He had slept outside all night. And I was so shocked. But at the same time, I understood the compassion that it took for someone to do that. And I just saw my dad and my family in a whole different light after that. And it meant so much to me that I always carry that compassion that I saw my family show, and especially my father.
Yeah.
And I think that really set the tone for what my career was going to be like. No matter what I did, I was going to have that.
So, basing on how you grew up and just in such a rural area, and understanding that probably the community is very close knit, I would imagine that gave opportunity to demonstrate that over and over again until at what point you left. So, when was that?
Well, I left right after high school, and I moved from this little town to Fort Collins, where I went to Colorado State University. And what an experience that was. The people in my cafeteria at my dormitory, there were more there than there were in my whole town. So you can imagine
Oh my
sitting,
goodness.
and having that experience. But at the same time, I really embraced it. I knew it was going to be exciting, and so I had a great time there in Fort Collins. But I went there for 2 years before my mother got sick. She developed breast cancer. And so I decided to go back to the San Luis Valley to be with her. And so she subsequently died about a year later, and but I stayed there.
Well, we will hear more about your story from Marguerite Salazar when we come back. Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate. We will be back with more with Dora, Rebecca Laurie, and Marguerite Salazar here on KDMT 1690. With us here on Connect and Collaborate. Today, we are connecting with Dora, Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies, and Rebecca Laurie is here to lead off the conversation.
Yes, and our guest is Executive Director Salazar, who's also the State Insurance Commissioner. Executive Director Salazar, you were telling us about where you grew up and how that kind of set the path towards where you are now. And so can you highlight a little bit more about, your schooling and how that set you on your path and some of the steps that you took that defined you?
Sure. I mentioned earlier that my father was a big influence, and so one of the things he encouraged me to do was to become an astronaut. And you can imagine in the early 70s, that really wasn't something women were doing, and there were no STEM programs or things like that. But his caveat was, if you become a dietitian, that can take you into a pathway to be an astronaut. You can cook for the astronauts. And so I followed his lead, and I said, sure, I'll go try that. So got into the School of Home Economics and was doing that for a while, and soon realized that that's not what I wanted to do. But in there were courses on child development and child psychology and things like that. So I eventually ended up with a master's degree in counseling. And so took that and got my first job at a community mental health center. And I did a lot of work with young children, and then I moved into doing therapy with children, adolescents, couples, things like that. But I soon realized that an hour in a therapy room with a family or a child really wasn't what I wanted to do. It didn't seem like I was able to make that big a difference by just spending that amount of time. I wanted to do more in systems. And so I created my own business. I started a business, and I contracted with hospitals, nursing homes, private practices, helping them understand federal regulations and how to get things done from that avenue. And so and it was very successful. I had a great time, but that is when I realized that I could interpret and understand federal regs, which is not an easy thing to do, but for some reason I was able to do that. From there, I was recruited into going to work for a community health center. And community health centers across the country take care of underserved and uninsured people. So when I went to work for this company in Alamosa, again, headquartered there, we had 3 primary care clinics. And I eventually became the CEO. And when I left in 2010, we had 26 primary care clinics, 10 dental sites, 3 physical therapy departments, and 1 Alzheimer's daycare program.
Wow.
So what I was doing the whole time was trying to provide services and create programs that people could go to who not only didn't have insurance, but a lot of times when you live in rural areas, even if you have insurance, if your doctor doesn't accept that insurance, then you don't have access. And so I accepted all forms of insurance, took Medicaid, Medicare, did all of these things, and branched out of the San Luis Valley into the lower Arkansas Valley. I had clinics in La Junta, Lamar, Los Animas. I ended up going to Canyon City because during that period of when all the prisons were being built, they realized that they didn't have enough primary care doctors. So the county commissioners asked me if I would go set up a program there. So I did, set up 2 clinics in Canyon City. Then I got called to go to Durango, set up clinics there. Also taking care of a large group of migrant farm workers who come to Colorado every year for a few months to harvest all of the crops. So I did that. But my whole work was always in how are we going to fund this? How are we going to take care of people? Because while we accepted all forms of insurance and got a few grants, there was still never enough money. So when the Affordable Care Act was passed, and I was asked to go to the regional office, I thought, this is perfect. This is my dream come true. We're going to be able to insure all these people, and, I can help get these programs set up and help people understand what it means in all these different states. And I also had 33 federally recognized tribes I could work with. And so it was really a great opportunity to move from my love and my passion of getting and helping people get access to health care and moving it into the broader sector. And so I was able to do that, did that for 4 years. And then Governor Hickenlooper asked me to join his team as the insurance commissioner. Oh. So what was going on, that was the summer of 2013. And we were going to stand up the health exchange in October of that year. But when I got to the Division of Insurance is when we had the big fire at Black Forest and the flood, the Great Flood of 2013. So suddenly, instead of focusing on healthcare, I was in the middle of all these property and casualty issues, flood, fire, helping people recover. And he sent me to some of the evacuation sites and went back to my counseling days because nobody was interested in talking about insurance, but they sure wanted to talk to me about their losses and their fears.
What happened.
Yeah, and everything that happened. And what an introduction to insurance that was. I often say that I came in between hell and high water.
Right.
Because it truly was.
That would be pretty accurate.
And then after that, in October, we stood up the health exchange and then just moved forward. So it's been quite the experience because, as anybody knows, it's complicated and it's been up and down. And my whole goal within the Division of Insurance was, how do you stabilize the market? How do we help the insurance companies do what they need to do, but at the same time make sure that individuals, customers, consumers get what they've paid for? And so that's the whole role, whether it be health insurance or automobile or homeowners, those kind of things. The idea, again, is protecting that consumer. And that goes back to my roots of trying to make sure that people get what they deserve and what they've paid for.
So quickly going back to the community health centers and just the growth that took place under your leadership, and then especially coming in being essentially a small business owner.
Right.
So going from kind of, public health, serving as a counselor, becoming a small business owner in the private sector, then working in kind of the hybrid public private sector with the community health centers, fully going into the public sector then as insurance commissioner. I mean, that's such an arc for you to be able to see the whole spectrum of how people are cared for, almost from the cradle all the way to the grave in some aspects. And so I'm just curious, given the theme, being a female leader, what would you say were some of those challenges that you really had to overcome in that regard? Because it's certainly, you worked hard for all of this, and there's so many people who benefited from it, but it's not necessarily common that it would be a female leading it.
That's true. That's true. And I think like a lot of, and it's probably true for a lot of female leaders, that when you walk in a room, often you're the only woman in the room. And it's hard sometimes to get your voice to be heard. And so you have to learn to raise that voice and have important points that you bring up, and to not feel like you're anything less than anybody else in the room. And I think that for someone who, like me, coming of age in the 70s, women still were not held up, as equals.
Right.
And so I really, I think I needed to learn that. But I had a lot of really great women mentors, older women who, from here in Denver or different places, who were doing those kind of things, and I could learn from them. And I think that really is a big piece of any woman who is coming into different business. If you can find a mentor and have somebody show you the way, because one of the big issues I had was fundraising. And it's hard for women a lot of times to deal with money and ask for money and go out.
For money.
It's hard. And so when I could see other women doing it, and one of the things that happened was I was early trustee of the Women's Foundation of Colorado. And so here we had some very powerful women who were raising $10 million to start as this endowment that we could then give out grants for self-sufficiency of women and girls. And so I would go with those women, and they would not be afraid to ask for $1 million. And so things like that. So it taught me so much, just having those women in front of me and showing me the way to do that, and having, because the other thing was coming from a rural area too, you're not that sophisticated person, that you see in the city. And so I was that country girl. And, that's something too you have to not overcome, because I think there is some good
There's
about
definite value in that character, for sure.
Exactly. But I think sometimes people will look down on that.
Right.
And rural areas are always
idea.
like, oh God, here, we got to hear about the rural issues. But they're huge. And for a state like Colorado, I think that prepared me in working in Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, because they're all rural. And I'd always say I've got the ruggedly individual square states in my region, and they were all so fun to work with because because of my rural roots.
Yeah, so speaking of those ruggedly individual states, when you were appointed by President Obama to serve in the capacity we had talked about to oversee the implementation of the ACA, what did that mean for our state in particular, and of course, obviously, the whole region?
Well, the regional office is headquartered here in Denver, so it meant that we were going to have a lot of attention paid to us. The other thing was that Colorado right away took advantage of all the opportunities. We expanded Medicaid, we had our own state-based exchange, and we took advantage of all those things, which a lot of other states didn't. And so I was able to help them understand how that could have helped them had they taken our lead.
Yes. Thank you so much for your perspective. We are talking with Marguerite Salazar. She's the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, as well as the Insurance Commissioner, and we'll be back with more right after this break. We're so glad you're staying with us here on Connect and Collaborate today, and we are connecting with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies,
you got
today,
it.
known as DORA. I'm sorry, Rebecca, I stumble over so many things.
It is no problem. It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, and I think your business card has to fold out to get it all on there.
Almost. But no, thank you, Tammy. It's always such a pleasure to be here, to be able to bring the leaders of DORA to come on the show and talk and kind of unveil the mysteries of regulation and how DORA really strives to work in the business community as well. And today we have the most special guest, because it's our executive director and also the state insurance commissioner, Marguerite Salazar. And we've been talking to Marguerite about her history, and given the theme of women in business, what has led her to where she's at today as such an illustrious leader in our community. And Marguerite, I'd love for you to pick back up where we left off in the last segment, talking about your appointment, bringing essentially the ACA to not only Colorado, but several other Western states, and really some of the challenges that you had to overcome to be able to make that happen with such a huge new program.
Sure. As I look back on the transition that I made from being CEO of a very large community health center, being able to spend as much money as I needed to, or set up events and do pretty much anything I wanted, to then go to federal government was a huge change. And one of the things that I tell people is you've got to have a lot of ego strength, because when you're working under a secretary who's working under the president of the United States, you really aren't that important. And so you've got to be able to reconcile that. And I saw that a lot of my counterparts had a hard time with that. They felt that this appointment just put them, on the pinnacle of their career, and then they said, but the secretary never talks to us, or we don't get to see her as often as we'd like to. But even the president, people felt that they should be able to have more audiences with the president. Well, he was really busy being the president.
Yeah.
And the secretary was really busy defending the ACA. She was always in front of a hearing of some sort. So it was rare that she was able to come out to the regions and talk to us. So, I think me understanding that, and it took about probably 5 or 6 months to get that. But I got to tell you that a lot of my counterparts never got it for the whole time they were there. And I just feel that you have to understand what your job is and what it means to just go do that job, and not worry about what your personal feelings are about
or recognition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That, that at some
Striving
point
to do the job versus striving for the recognition.
And you've already proven yourself, so you're there.
That's why
so
you're
now
there.
go do the job. And I think that's something. And I learned a lot by watching the secretary, by seeing how she dealt with issues, because Kathleen Sebelius had been governor of Kansas. She was also an insurance commissioner even before she was governor, and then became secretary. And watching, again, I keep bringing up mentors, but she was a fabulous person to watch and to learn from, and to see how she dealt with really being put under the fire all the time. So that when I was working for HHS, one of the things I thought was that I had been through everything. I had worked with migrant farm workers. The health disparities were so huge. I understood everything. And then I met the tribes. And I realized at that point that I didn't know much at all, because what they would go through, the different tribes in all of the states, was so even far worse than what I had ever seen a migrant or a rural person deal with in terms of access to health, that it really humbled me. And you have to be willing and ready, because the first time I sat down to do a consultation with the tribes, and they were bringing up all these issues, and going through my head is, I can fix that. I've seen that before. I can do that. But yet the process to actually do that is very different.
Right.
And so again, you have to step back and meet people where they're at. And all my experience had in a sense prepared me, but I had to learn the hard way in a lot of ways. They would say, they're sovereign nations, and so they'd ask me, they'd say, our president is here. Where is the president of the United States? And I'd say, well, I'm here. The secretary asked me to come meet with you. And they'd say, well, where is she? Why are you here?
Right.
And so, the whole idea, again, it wasn't me that they were worried or angry about. It's the federal government that they really didn't have a lot of trust in.
And they wanted that representation there if they were bringing their
president
heads
over, because they're sovereign nations. And so, that was a real good learning experience for me, very humbling. But again, it strengthened what I needed to do and helped me see that my job was to make sure that they had what they needed, and it wasn't about them honoring me or trying to say, oh, the great regional director is here. That was not it.
Yay, she's here.
Yeah.
That's all of our prayers are answered, right?
and the other thing is, even though I thought the ACA was the greatest thing to ever happen, that wasn't the case, as we know, in a lot of other places. And so standing up in front of a group and getting heckled was also a really interesting experience.
Wow.
And being told, this is not the way to go. This is communism. This is socialism. And I kept saying it's not. These are still private companies who are selling these plans. The federal government's helping to subsidize, but we all get subsidized one way or another. If you get employer health benefits, you're being subsidized. So we're trying to help these individuals who hadn't been able to have insurance in the past get insurance.
Right.
And so being able to stand in front of a crowd and take that kind of heckling or questioning
That's tough.
was tough. But at the end of every time I did that, they would always thank me. And they'd always say, we appreciate that you at least came and talked to us.
Because they could see that you listened, right? And they needed to be heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to get their questions answered.
And so I imagine that's what really primed you by 2013 for the appointment as insurance commissioner. And can you highlight some of the opportunities and challenges that you faced starting in that new role? And I think you talked a little bit about it.
Right, when I talked
during
about
the Great Flood,
the fires
yes.
and the Great Flood. Well, then what happened when the when the exchange was set up was that with the ACA came a whole lot of transparency. And so now, for one of the first times, people could see not only what they were going to pay, but what everybody else was paying for insurance. And in Colorado, we have, again, lots of disparities. And in the western part of the state, especially in the resort areas, their premiums are sometimes double what people are paying here in Denver. And so they had always paid more because their costs are higher in that area. Everything is higher there, but they didn't ever realize it. And so that was, again, the opportunity where I said, well, let's go to Frisco, let's go to Aspen, let's go explain things. And, frankly, my staff were not so excited about doing that because nobody likes to get yelled at. But again, from my experience at HHS, I knew that was the way to do it. And you've got to hear from these stakeholders. So again, here we go out to Frisco explaining how premiums are set up, why the costs are different. And it's hard when people tell you, I'm having to pay more for insurance than for my mortgage. I'm never going to say that that's okay.
Right.
So, we did a lot of that kind of outreach. But again, when it was over, they would just say, that was a really good meeting, and thank you for coming, and thank you for explaining these things to us. Not that they liked it, because who wants to spend $1,200 a month on insurance?
No.
So we started, my first thought was, well, we got to fix this. How are we going to, and what is it? What's causing it? And that's when we started doing a lot of studies about why is there such a difference? And it does come down to the cost. And the cost of health care in certain parts of the state is a lot higher. So, and that's the reason that the premiums are higher or lower. It's a direct reflection of the cost of care. And so people, even today I get calls and they're telling me these companies they're gouging us, they're charging too much. And I go through all the pieces of what we do to make sure that they're justifying their rates. And I tell them, but at the end of the day, if they've charged you too much, they have to refund whatever, the excess. They've got to prove that they've spent 80 cents of every dollar on health care.
I appreciate you providing the answers. That's, I think, what so many people are asking for. We'll be back with more with Marguerite Salazar, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies and the state's Insurance Commissioner. We will be right back. Thanks so much for staying with us today here on Connect and Collaborate. We have been focusing on women in business this week, and we're very fortunate today to be talking with DORA, Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies, and we have both Rebecca Laurie and Marguerite Salazar with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. We're having such a great discussion with Executive Director Salazar, and I think we'll just hop right back into it. Can you tell us, Marguerite, being appointed this past July as Executive Director of DORA, what's your overall philosophy and approach regarding regulatory oversight, especially given the fact that you've had, all this experience both in the private sector and the public sector?
You know, what I've seen in my career is that people just want a level playing field, and they want everybody to play by the same rules. And that's how I see the Department of Regulatory Agencies, because nobody really understands regulation. You know, when I say I regulate insurance companies or we regulate railroad or things like that, but when you say we want to make sure that the rules apply to everybody at the same level, they get that. And I think once people understand that, then they're willing to play the game. We also talk about, and it's really important to me to continue the focus on consumer protection. And that, I think a lot of times people forget that that's really what DORA is about. We want to make sure that consumers are protected. We want to make sure, and we do that through a variety of ways, whether it be through banking or securities. I keep bringing up the PUC, but there's a whole lot there. They regulate all of the energy prices, what you pay to Xcel or Black Hills Gold, and they regulate the trains and the safety of the trains. And there's so much out there that, these things don't just happen. There has to be a group of people who are watching out for that and making sure that everything is safe. And so I want to continue with what I think the former directors have done in just making sure that we have fair regulation, that it makes sense to people, and that we don't overburden them with regulation. I think it's important that we go through our rules and regulations, and if things don't make sense anymore, let's get rid of it. Let's just not do that anymore, because every year our legislature passes lots of laws, and then we've got to take those pieces and incorporate them into what we do. And so that creates more regulation. So I really want to be able to get rid of as much as I take in.
Almost the old adage.
Right.
get rid of the old if you're bringing in something new. Yeah. Given the theme of women in business, it's worth noting, and Marguerite, maybe you can highlight this, that women as employees at DORA play an important role.
Oh, absolutely. And, I actually want to start with the cabinet. The Governor Hickenlooper's cabinet is about 50% women, if not more. And I think I heard that that's better than most states who, when you look at their cabinets and see how many women actually serve. And also at DORA, we've got several women who are division directors, starting, with people like Ronnie Hines, who runs the Department of Professions and Occupations. In Ronnie's area, she licenses over 400,000 people here in Colorado, and is responsible for that, making sure that not only are they prepared and tested and able to go out and do the things they do, whether it be a medical doctor, a dentist, or a cosmetologist, that that department is monitored by a very capable woman. I have two women, but the two top executive positions under me are both women as well. My deputy executive director and our director of operations is a woman. The woman who runs director Aubrey Abriel from the Division of Civil Rights serves. Cindy Schoenholt.
Yes.
Runs the Office of Consumer Services.
Council, yes.
We've got Marsha Waters, who is over real estate, and you can imagine how many things fall under real estate, because it's also conservation easements and those kind of things that I think are typically male-oriented. But and I think, am I leaving anybody out, Rebecca?
Well, actually, when you mentioned real estate, I mean, there's 50,000 real estate professionals that are under that division that Marsha oversees. Ronnie, as Marguerite mentioned, that division alone, Division of Professions and Occupations, is responsible for licensing nearly 15% of the state's workforce. And then, of course, there's the Division of Insurance, which Marguerite oversees, and
of which I know well. And one of the things the division does is we license producers and agents, and about 47% of all of those folks in Colorado, which is 47% of about 124,000, are women. And who would have thought that many women are actually out selling insurance, not just healthcare, but title, and automobile and homeowners, all of those things. So we license and have that many women out in the field doing that work.
You say that, and I realize every insurance agent I've worked with for my personal stuff has been a woman.
There you go.
That's really interesting, because I think the perception is that it's typically a male industry.
There might have been one guy in there, but all I can think of right now are the women. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good balance there, and one of the things we've talked about also on the show is really trying to support military and veterans through streamlined policies. And Marguerite, wondering if you could highlight that a little bit.
Because this one is so important. I think when military families are when they get out of the military and they move from state to state, so they may have been licensed in a certain state. We've made it much easier for those licenses to be transferred into Colorado. We've made it a point to take away as much of the red tape as possible so that veterans can start working if they move into Colorado, because a lot of them actually get transferred here as well. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of military bases, so not only for them, but also for their spouses, whether it be the husband or the wife. We've really have focused on cutting out the red tape and making sure that they can get into their work without having to delay because of a license that didn't transfer.
Right. So, there's, of course, this, again, I think some assumptions that the spouse is female, but of course we know that's not always the case. But yes, the relocated spouse licensure allows spouses that have an active license in good standing from another state to practice up to 1 year from the date
where
they
they're
move.
Relocated.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, as far as some of the credentialing and licensing initiatives, really it's following through with some legislative mandates. And what I'm curious, Marguerite, is how you see that helps support families' economic health, these kinds of policies.
Well, they really do, because if someone is being delayed, being able to start their business because they don't have their license, what does that do to the family? They're going to have to end up taking a job that doesn't pay as well as the one that they're trained for. And so, of course, their economic viability is going to suffer. Mm-hmm. So it's really important, no matter what we do, that we're going to we're going to look at those issues and problems. I get a lot of calls. I say the universe works in a real interesting way, and every once in a while my phone rings and it's a consumer or someone who's having an issue getting their license or having a problem with their insurance company. And I really I like talking to folks like that, because I get a feel for what the barriers are within our department and what doesn't work for them. And it's interesting to know that a lot of professions want to be licensed, even though they're not. They don't have to be. It's like, say, massage therapists or genetic counselors. I think that's another. There's all these fields, and I think they want to be licensed because it does give them higher status as a profession, and perhaps they can even bill insurance. So we really listen hard to see, why do they want to do that? Does it make sense? And then we have boards that help us make those decisions. And again, we're always looking for good community members to serve on our board, so that it's not just us, it's not just state employees making these decisions, but we bring professionals to the table. And we always look to balance our boards on from rural to urban, male, female, those kind of things, so that they're going to represent our workforce.
And then also, you had mentioned earlier how important consumer protection is, and I know we don't have much time left, but do you want to highlight that really quick?
Yeah, again, I think regulation is all about consumer protection, because, when someone doesn't get say their house burns down, right, and then the insurance company decides that there was an exclusion of, if it's an electrical fire, you're not going to get covered. That's really where we come in, where the division can go in and help people go through their contract and go after those companies who aren't doing the right thing. At the same time, if people are trying to scam the insurance companies, we can figure that out. That doesn't happen in my, in my experience, we haven't seen that very much.
Thank you so much, Marguerite Salazar, for joining us for Connect and Collaborate today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And thank you, Rebecca Laura, for bringing her along.
Thank you, Tammy.